Are you with us, Claire?
Yep. I'm just checking that it's going. See, I think I've got so many files open, my computer's running the go slow. Hi everyone. Give me a second to get my screen set up. Right, that should get everybody on mute at the moment. Hi everyone and welcome to Lanarkshire Family History Society's webinar for January. My name is Claire Wilson and I will be your host this evening. My co-host tonight is Christine Woodcock. Christine, how are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. I can't wait for this. Been excited since we knew it was happening. Are you there? Did we lose her? That's hilarious. Look at her face.
I was going to say, my laptop has been threatening to do updates all day, so I'm fairly worried it's going to just die halfway through.
All right. Right. So Claire was going to do a couple of announcements. We will get to those at the end, since she has the slides and I don't. And Graeme, I'm going to let you introduce yourself since you sent the bio to her.
I can't remember what I said in my bio now.
Just wing it. Just tell us anything. It's all folklore anyway. It doesn't much matter.
Yeah, that is fair
enough. Will ask people though, just before I let you take the reins, if everybody could just turn their cameras and off, that helps us with bandwidth, which I think is probably what's happened with Claire, and mute your microphone so that we aren't distracted and we can all be zeroed in on listening to Graeme.
Okay, all together.
All right, get off you.
Oh, she's back.
Right, go ahead.
Yeah, so, well, yeah, my name's Graeme.
Hi, sorry.
Oh, you're back. I just said that we would do the slides at the end. So Graeme's just about to introduce himself.
Ah, right, okay, sorry.
Okay, bye.
I don't know what happened, I got kicked out.
Yeah, that's okay.
So my name's Graeme, and along with my dog, whenever she's sleeping somewhere, we're Scotland's Stories. And basically what I do is I tell the stories of Scotland in a sort of entertaining, hopefully an accessible way. What I'm going to do tonight, if I'm guessing if Christine and Claire want me just to jump straight in, and I've got
go ahead, just pull your.
So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to do this because it all makes a lot more sense while I'm doing that. So.
And it looks fantastic.
yeah, it looks like something anyway. Hang on, once I figure out how to.
Just at the top there, it says slideshow, and then from the beginning. Now the next one down. Nope.
Well, I've got this thing stuck in the way just now.
Okay.
So hopefully that's going to disappear and then I can do it. Or it is actually, I'm sure there's a button that starts. For some reason, I can't see the start slideshow. There we go. I'm just going to do that. Okay, right.
All right, good. All right.
So moving on. So I'm going to talk about the stories of Lanarkshire. So here we are. Who am I? So as I said, my name is Graeme. That is Molly. Molly's the one on the left. Yeah, basically I split my time between trekking around Scotland, finding interesting places and telling stories about them, and somehow I managed to convince people that this is a job. And obviously I got a wee bit excited when I discovered, so Visit Scotland have named 2022 Scotland's Year of Stories. So, well, what makes a good story and a good storyteller, I guess? I mean, everybody likes stories. Everybody's a storyteller in their own way. The medium might have changed, with most people watching TV nowadays rather than sitting around a fire listening to a story that's been passed down through the generations. But the essence is still the same. Stories have the ability to get your heart pumping a wee bit faster, or the hair on the back of your neck stand up. You might find yourself holding your breath or tears welling up. And, you know, it's whether it's your grandpa telling you a legend about the local fairy hill or the kelpie that's hiding in the loch, or if you're just sat on your own binge watching Game of Thrones. And a side note, where do you think they got all their inspiration for? All those blood-filled tragedies? Obviously Scotland. That's because Scotland is absolutely packed, full of stories. The best part about them is that very few are set in a land far, far away. Not that there's anything wrong with once upon a times. There's still a few of those in Scottish stories and they are excellent. But most of the stories, they tie us both to the landscape and to our ancestors. Now, Scotland's stories, they vary wildly from area to area. In the Northern Isles, we find Trows and the terrifying Knuckleavy. The borders, they're full of brownies and fairies. The Highlands, they've got clan battles and more ghosts than you can shake a spooky stick at. But I'm here to talk about Lanarkshire. That's a fascinating area when it comes to stories. You can find just about any kind you want here. You've got real life heroes, legends and folklore, and of course, all the ghostly goings on. So I was trying to find a way of linking all of these together neatly. But it doesn't work. You can't go chronologically or anything like that. So in the end, I thought I was just going to split them into those categories and I'm going to crack on. So hopefully you're all sitting comfortably. I'm going to start off, what better way to start than Scotland's national hero, the central character in so many stories, both real and fiction, William Wallace. Now, he regularly tops the lists of the most famous Scots, even made it into a list of the most influential Scots of the 20th century, even though he'd been dead for 600 years. So when Mel Gibson said his line in Braveheart that if Wallace was here, he'd shoot fireballs from his eyes and bolts of lightning from somewhere else, he was actually making a pretty good point. And that's one version of Wallace, but we'll stick with this one. So even in his own time, he sounded like a legendary character. But Wallace was obviously a real person. He was born either in Ellerslie in Ayrshire or Eldersley near Paisley. But thanks to embellished stories like Blind Harry's book here, The Wallace, which I've got a copy of, it's been very hard to separate facts from fiction. So for anybody who isn't aware, William Wallace was a freedom fighter, caught up in the Scottish Wars of Independence, the very end of the 13th century and the start of the 14th. He wasn't a low-born peasant or a poor farmer like he's often portrayed. He's the son of a minor noble who was well-educated and even better armed. By the time we start to hear about Wallace, he was already in his mid-20s. He was making a nuisance of himself. There are stories of him spending his time travelling around central Scotland and seemingly just picking fights in his spare time for the fun of it. But Wallace really burst onto the scene during what's become known as the Action at Lanark. It was May 1297. And we'll never truly know what happened, but piecing things together from the records we do have, it seemed to have started with what we like to call a bit of a rammy with some of the English soldiers. Insults have been flying around and at some point, tempers finally snapped. One thing that's generally agreed about Wallace is that he was incredibly physically impressive and also incredibly hot-headed. And that's a dangerous combination. So even though Lanark had an English sheriff and what was essentially an occupying army, the big Scot and his friends just got stuck in. The one report claims that up to 50 soldiers were left scattered around the streets by the time the tide started to turn against Wallace. The Scots, they beat a hasty retreat, helped out by a local woman believed to be Wallace's lover, if not his wife, called Marion Braidfoot. She smuggled Wallace and his pals out through her home and they escaped into the countryside. If they thought that was the end of the matter, they were sorely mistaken. William Heselrigg, the Sheriff of Lanark, wasn't going to allow some Scottish upstarts to make a fool of him and his soldiers. Order has to be maintained. So according to Blind Harry, he made an example of Marion, publicly executing her as an example to those who helped rebels. All he managed to achieve, though, was enrage Wallace to get his revenge. That same night, he returned to Lanark under cover of darkness and he kicked his way into Heselrigg's bedroom, killing both the sheriff and his son. The rest of Wallace's band of not-so-merry men spread through the town to inflict a similar punishment on any other senior officials, burning much of Lanark in the process. We don't really know if this was an isolated, spontaneous incident or part of a wider plan of local uprisings, but what we do know So just a matter of months later, William Wallace, until the action of Lanark, a practical nobody, had been chosen as one of the leaders of Scottish resistance, and along with Andrew de Murray, who won what's seen as one of the country's greatest victories at Stirling Bridge. But of course, William Wallace isn't the only swashbuckling, heroic Scot to make his name in Lanarkshire. And almost as famous and arguably more impressive is James Douglas, known as Good Sir James to his friends, or the Black Douglas to his enemies. He built a reputation as such a fierce warrior in his fight for Scottish freedom that he became sort of a bogeyman in the north of England. James even made it into an English lullaby, said, "Hush ye, do not fret ye, the Black Douglas shall not get ye." And this is the remains of Douglas Castle. There's not a huge amount left to see, and it's obviously nothing like what would have been there in his time. But this is the area he came from, Douglas. Douglas meaning the black water, the black river. James was the eldest son of William the Hardy, but on his father's death, he had no lands to inherit. William had continuously rebelled against the English occupation, then he would make his peace, and then he would rebel again, and eventually King Edward just had enough, took all the lands off him, and they were now the property of Robert Clifford. James, he humbly went to King Edward to request his ancestral home back, willing to submit and pledge his fealty. But the king hated his father so much, he had James forcibly removed. Now, but Douglas, he was just a man with no land or authority, just a sword and a good arm for swinging it. James, he approached Robert the Bruce to offer his fealty instead. Bruce was fresh from murdering his opponent to the crown at Dumfries, and he was now on his way to Scone to be crowned a new King of Scots. He would have needed all the help he could get, so I don't think the decision to take Douglas on would have taken very long. So from then on, Bruce and Douglas, they shared the highs and the lows of the fight to reclaim Scotland. They got off to a terrible start, losing the Battle of Methven and Dalry, being forced to flee somewhere to the west over the winter of 1306. Nobody knows exactly where they went, although you'll find loads, several Bruce's caves all around the place. This is the King's Cave over in Arran that I went to see. So if you've ever heard the tale of Bruce and the spider, you might be shocked to hear that you've been lied to all these years. The original story is centered around James Douglas. He was the one who watched a spider in a cave trying to spin its web, and when the spider jumped from one strand to the next, it missed, fell to the cave floor, and he was forced to climb up and start again. Finally, the spider made its leap, finished the web, and it gave James inspiration to carry on. And he heard Bruce talking about the hopelessness of their situation. James explained this premise that if at first you don't succeed, try and try again. So then after that mysterious winter, wherever they were, Bruce and his very, very small band of companions returned to Scotland to try again, early in 1307. The tactic was guerrilla warfare, avoiding open conflict. They knew they didn't have the numbers, so they were going to use their wits and their skills instead. And while the main group were building up their numbers and stoking resistance around the country, Douglas asked that his king allow him just one thing. He wanted his castle back. Where diplomacy had failed with the English king, Douglas was going to use cold, hard violence instead. He arrived in the area with just 2 men, and he used his local contacts to keep them hidden. It's not exactly a huge force to defeat a castle garrison, but this was a good Sir James Douglas. He didn't need very much. So with advice from those that he trusted, a small group were formed, those that were willing to rebel against the English garrison. Everything was falling into place. It was just in time for Douglas's cunning plan. It was Palm Sunday, and the garrison at Douglas Castle, they left to attend a church service at St. Bride's here. James and his men, they attended the service in disguise. They sat down, went along with it just as if nothing was amiss. When everybody was in place and the service was about to start, James gave the signal. It was one enormous cry of "Douglas!" And out came the hidden weapons, down went the garrison. Anybody still left alive, they were dragged back to the castle. There was no mercy to be given, though. The soldiers were beheaded for being piled up inside the storeroom. James had won back his ancestral home, but this was deep inside an insecure part of the country. He didn't have the men to garrison the walls. It was only a matter of time before an army came to take it back. So they removed all the supplies they could carry. They threw the rest of them in with the executed soldiers, and they burned the castle to the ground. They poisoned the well. They made sure there was nothing of use left for those that would find the carnage. It later became known as the Douglas Larder. The good Sir James, he would eventually return to rebuild his home, and his bones were buried at St Bride's, the scene of the brutal attack that really kicked off his reputation. So his tomb is still inside. You can visit it if you are lucky enough to find the key holder. There's a sign on the door that tells you where it is. They weren't there when I was here, so this is a Wikipedia picture. And there are two favourite quotes I've got that they could well have been as embellished as all the stories about Wallace, but I really hope that James Douglas did say them. So one of them when he was besieging Berwick, and he received a letter from the Pope telling him that if he didn't stop now, if he didn't stop killing other Christians, he was going to be excommunicated from the Catholic Church. Douglas just scrunched up the letter and said, well, I'd rather enter Berwick than paradise. And secondly, when a foreign knight had heard legends about the Black Douglas met him, he was a wee bit disappointed. James, he didn't have a single scar on his face. He was a bit of a prey boy. That was unusual for somebody that had gotten as many fights as he did. The guy challenged him and said, you can't be the Black Douglas. Why have you not got any scars on your face? And Douglas just replied that nobody had ever been fast enough to get to him. So we're moving on from stories of warriors to a story of a saint. Now, stories of St Mungo, like many Scottish saints, they don't so much walk a fine line between fact and fiction as they just jump from side to side with will. And he was the man who founded what would become Glasgow Cathedral in the 6th century. His remains are still buried beneath it. He may well have been born in Fife, but he was made in Lanarkshire. Some of the most famous miracles that Mungo performed during his life, they're here, they're proudly displayed on Glasgow's coats of arms. But the most important one, in my opinion, happened in the woods, not far from Cadzow Castle, and that's this one with the salmon in the ring. So, you can barely see that. That is Cadzow Castle. If you can just see it poking up in amongst the trees, it's a bit precarious these days. So, at this point, in the 6th century, the area was ruled by the King of Strathclyde. He was a powerful man. His queen had been unfaithful and taken a secret lover. So to make matters worse, the culprit was one of her husband's greatest warriors. She delighted in visiting him behind the king's back, and she would lavish him with gifts. The news would eventually reach the king that his wife was having an affair, but he wouldn't hear a word of it. He loved his wife. He was convinced that she loved him back, so she would never have strayed. The servants, well, they could see what was happening clear as day, but their protests fell on deaf ears. That all changed one day, and the king was out hunting with a band of his warriors, and he spotted his companion's hand. The man was wearing an elegant ring that had been given as a present to the queen years before. The king was crushed at the idea of his wife's betrayal. Not only had she cheated on him, but she'd given away his gift. He couldn't bring himself to just accuse him outright. Instead, the king, he stole the ring where the warrior slept. He launched it into the River Clyde. When he got back, he said to his wife, why do you never wear that ring I gave you anymore? Why don't you put it on for dinner tomorrow? Well, the queen, she played along and she said, oh yeah, no, that's no problem at all. I'll just go get it. And she asked her lover to return it just temporarily. But of course, it was nowhere to be found. It was deep in the river. In a panic, the queen, she rushed to St Mungo and begged for his help. I mean, he was well aware of what she'd been doing, and as a man of God, he couldn't condone adultery, never mind assist with it. But, she confessed her sins and begged for forgiveness. If Mungo didn't help her, then she and her lover, they were surely going to be killed. The wise preacher, he sent a follower out to fish in the Clyde and bring back the first thing that he caught. The time was running out, but the Queen, she had faith in Mungo and his reputation. The man, well, he returned with a large salmon. Mungo sliced it open in front of her, glinting inside, well, there was a missing ring. And that was a chance the Queen's redemption. And that's why the salmon is now on the Glasgow coat of arms. So we're moving on now. This is the Falls of Clyde, and it's the Cora Lynn waterfall. It's the highest of the Falls of Clyde. It was described by William Wordsworth as the Clyde's most majestic daughter. And it's undeniably beautiful, but it has a link to a much more tragic majestic daughter. Because hidden high up on the cliff edge is Cadzow Castle. And when I say hidden, I mean you can walk right past it and you never know it's there. And these days, it's a colony of bats, so you can't get inside. And I can only hope that it was bats that we heard behind that door that spooked Molly like this. Now, etymologists, they'll tell you, Cora means a marshy place, but the legend says that both the waterfall and the castle are named after Cora, a daughter of King Malcolm II. And if that's true, this would have been way back in the very early 11th century. Now, this Princess Cora was a bit of a tomboy in an age of strict gender roles. She would much rather fight and hunt like her father than settle down to be used as a pawn in some arranged marriage. Malcolm, he loved his daughter, especially because he had no sons. And he wished that, if anything, she could have taken the throne after him. Instead, he was determined she would marry well, and she was going to carry on his lineage that way. So to try and convince his daughter that some men actually aren't so bad, Malcolm organised a hunting party with all the different suitors. Maybe if Cora saw how good they were at her favourite activity, she would be so in awe that she would fall madly in love with one of them. And that's wishful thinking at its best, I think. Cora had joined her father in a hunting party in the woods near the Falls of Clyde. But it was like a meat market. Those men knew exactly why they were there, and they just would not leave her alone. They're constantly pestering her, trying to show how witty they were, or how much stronger they were than the other men there. As soon as she got rid of one of them, another just sprang up in his place. The princess needed a break. And so she made some excuses about relieving herself in private, and she just let her horse wander on its own accord. Soon she found herself far from the rest of the group. Peace and quiet at last, just the sound of the birds and the flowing water. It was bliss. That was when she came across a young man on his own fishing in the river. And he was astounded by her beauty. And automatically he just leapt up to his feet to talk to this mysterious girl who'd snuck up on him. Now, Cora, she just got rid of all those other men, and she was warned about the dangers of speaking to strangers. So she kicked her horse into a run and just fled downriver. The man was shocked, but he knew the cliffs, they suddenly veered off, not very far ahead. The girl was heading straight for it. So he jumped onto his own horse and he chased after her. It was too late. Cora's horse, it stumbled and it threw her over the edge. As apparently from that day on, it was known as Cora's Lynn. So it is a shame that, to be fair, so many of the best Scottish stories end in tragedy. And it often puts a right downer at the end. So I thought I'd follow this up with something a wee bit more cheerier, if you could say that, really. This is a story of the fairies of Merlin's Craig. And I just thought I'd put this here because this picture is actually a girl called Linley who did this. She does all the artwork for a group known as Folklore Scotland. And obviously she's very good at what she does. So full credit to Linley there, and you can follow her and visit her website and stuff. And this is a story, it's not so long ago. There was an honest and hard-working Lanarkshire labourer called Fergus. He was toiling away for his boss, the farmer. It was a tough life, both for Fergus and for his master. The farmer said, "Fergus, we're getting a wee bit low on fuel. It's wet just now. We're going to need plenty of warmth soon. You head over to Merlin's Craig, cut up some of that peat to dry out. Well, Fergus had never cut around Merlin's Craig before, but it wasn't really for him to decide. Packing up his shovel and basket with the farm's only pony, he trekked out over the misty moor towards the lump that he was set to dig at. The sooner he got started, the sooner he'd be finished. So, with an almighty thump, he sliced into the ground with his shovel. He could have sworn he heard something like a little shout over the squelch of peat bog, but must have been his imagination. So, raised the shovel again, thumped down, bit by bit, he cut that peat up. And just as he raised it one more time, he had a little voice from behind him. He said, "Don't you even think about it." Fergus had jumped out of his skin. There wasn't another person for miles around, and nobody could have snuck up on him that easily. I mean, it was the squelchy ground around him. He'd have heard them coming. Spinning around, couldn't see anybody until he looked down, and there was a tiny little woman in a flowing green dress, with her arms firmly crossed, a big frown on her face. She shouted up at the labourer, "Are you just going to stand there and gape at me after you've attacked my home? How'd you like it if I came and lifted your roof off with a shovel? Put it back, or you're going to be sorry." But Fergus, he didn't need told twice. He'd heard stories of the dangers of the fairy folk, though he never truly believed in them until now. Offending them would have dire consequences. So he put all the peat back, good as new, as best as he could, and he ran off back to the farm with a pony in tow. As he told the farmer what happened, the farmer scoffed at him. "Fairies. Aye, right. You've been gone for hours. You've had too many drams, and now my farm is the one that's going to suffer for it. So you get back there and you get that peat cut. If you don't come back with a basket full, don't come back at all." Poor Fergus, he had a little choice. He had a wife and 2 young children to feed. They were living paycheck to paycheck. He was obviously nervous as he started to cut back into the peat again, making sure he started a few feet away from where his last one was. Nothing happened. He cut more and more. It took him a few days to get it all done, carrying it back to the farm on the pony. Didn't so much as hear a grumble of discontent from anybody. Maybe he really had imagined the whole thing. Well, exactly 1 year had passed. Fergus had almost completely forgotten about the fairy incident. He was walking home from the farm that evening. It was such a nice night, he decided to wander the long way and go past Merlin's Craig. The scars from the peat they had dug out were still there. As he gazed down at them, he started to feel a wee bit sleepy. Well, it had been a hard day's work. It was warm, so I'd just sit down, have a wee nap on the way home. When he awoke, it was the middle of the night, and he was there in the centre of a ring of fairies, all dancing around him. They were having the time of their lives. Out of nowhere, the most beautiful woman Fergus had ever seen stepped into the ring and asked him to dance. I mean, he was no dancer, but she wasn't the kind of woman you said no to. They jigged and they reeled, and all thoughts of his family back home just slipped from Fergus's mind. All of a sudden, the music came to a stop. The fairies, they started to disappear inside gaps in the rocks around Merlin's Craig. Fergus, he looked on in wonder until he realised they were dragging him in with them. There was nothing he could do about it. Once he was inside, he turned around to his beautiful dancing partner, and he saw that she'd transformed into that little fairy that had confronted him that day, a year ago. What are you going to do with me? He stuttered. Only what you deserve for ignoring my warning. You stole our roof, and you're not leaving until it's grown back. Well, Fergus could only sit back and watch as the fairies worked away inside Merlin's Craig. They were writing and sewing and making tiny fairy arrows. He was sure he even saw a whiskey still at one point. But barely a day had passed when his fairy captors finally set him free. He was on his way back home. Not before they made him promise he was never going to destroy their home again. Then he crawled out the crevice and he saw, the turf roof. It really had grown back already. That was fast. Surely it must have been some kind of fairy magic. Eventually, he made it home, although something didn't look quite right. There was no time to think about that. He burst through the front door. He started to apologise to his wife. I'm so sorry I didn't make it back home last night. You must have been worried, but look, honestly, you're never going to believe where I've been. And he started to retell what had happened when he was interrupted by a couple of teenagers walking in the room. Who is this? Fergus asked. His wife was standing with her mouth hanging open in shock. What a stupid question. They're your children. It's no wonder you don't recognise them. You come in here with some made-up story about a night with the fairies and expect me to take you back. You've been gone for 7 years, Fergus. Well, that wasn't enough of a shock. Fergus, obviously, he kept his promise. His story is a prime example of why you never ever mess with fairies and you never ever go inside a fairy hill. The next story, we're moving on to those spooky ghosts now. Well, this one's not so much spooky. This is the Blue Flame of Strathaven. And it turned out I didn't have any pictures of Strathaven. So this is Strathaven Castle, fresh from Wikipedia as well. And instead, I'm just going to use this picture there. And this is actually Auchendrain Township, which if you've never been is fascinating. It's one of the last sort of townships that was still going right up to the 20th century. It sort of gives an idea of the old way of living. There was once a poor man, and he lived in Strathaven. And he dreamt a strange dream, 3 nights in a row. He saw a man in strange sort of old-fashioned clothes. He was burying a hoard of treasure just outside the town. Now, if it was once or twice, he might have just put that down to wishful thinking, but the third dream, it just seemed so real. To make sure there were no prying eyes, the man, he waited until nightfall, and he borrowed a wee lamp, and a pick, and a shovel from an unsuspecting neighbour, and he made his way to the spot he'd seen in his dream. Now, under the light of his lamp, he began to dig deeper and deeper until he was so deep he worried he wasn't going to get back out the hole again. He was just about ready to give up on the project, embarrassed that he believed in visions, when clang, he hit something solid. He was dug around the edges, and it was an enormous chest. Well, he was getting ready to open it when he realised that something wasn't right. The light from his lamp, it wasn't a warm yellow anymore. He realised he was bathed in this chill-inducing blue. And turning around, it wasn't his lamp at all. It was a mysterious, floating, icy blue flame. You'll often find in Scottish stories that a blue flame signals the presence of a spirit. It didn't say a word, but somehow it told the man he was digging in the wrong place. This was not the treasure he had dreamt about. It was a bit of like that Jedi mind trick. This is not the treasure you're looking for. The blue flame, he would show him where it was. Captivated by this appearance, the man, he didn't open the lid, he didn't ask any questions, he just picked up his things and he followed the flame's instructions all the way around to the other side of the hill. The time was getting on now, but he started to dig once again, down and down, even deeper than the previous hole. His little lamp had all but burned out and the first rays of dawn were starting to shine over the horizon. Enough was enough. Soon everybody in Strathaven was going to be awake. His neighbours would notice their tools were missing. Annoyed at having moved spots, he figured, must have imagined that blue flame. It's probably all the exhaustion from the digging, not having enough to eat that day. He headed back to his original hole, just ready to check what was inside that chest and take it away before anybody else woke up and got the chance. That enormous hole he dug had been completely filled in. It was smoothed over. It was like he'd never been there at all. It was pretty clear to that man then. He hadn't imagined anything. That blue flame was the ghost of the man he'd seen burying the treasure. And he realised now no amount of gold was worth messing around with the spirits of the dead. And that blue flame, so it's never been seen again. That's a one-off story. Marks out a specific spot for being special. And the next story was more of a regular visitor from the other world. And this is, as my assistant is demonstrating there, this is Bothwell Castle. It's one of Scotland's largest and most impressive 13th century castles. It's been called the grandest piece of secular architecture in medieval Scotland. I mean, it's beautiful and it's enormous. So the ruined fortress, it's seen its fair share of violence and destruction. But its most tragic story, it doesn't involve the wars of independence or the Jacobites. It's just about a young girl on her quest for love. It was one of the inhabitants of Bothwell Castle. She was a beautiful girl known as Bonnie Jean. As a noble's daughter, Jean had a responsibility to marry for the good of the family. But there was just one problem with that. She was already in a forbidden relationship. Jean's man, he was a lowly commoner from just across the river in Blantyre. To her surprise, a friendly monk from the priory visited Jean at the castle. He helped her hatch an escape plan. She was to sneak out of Bothwell Castle the night that she saw a lamp shining across the river. The monk, he would get a message to her lover and he would handle everything else. As you can see here, it's not very far across, so it would have been easy to see a little lamp burning over there. Night after night, Jean, she gazed across the River Clyde, tried to decipher any speck of light. You know, is that it? Is that the sign? No, not again. Eventually, she saw it. It was unmistakable. And the young lady, she gathered her things up. Butterflies filled her stomach as Jean tiptoed her way out of the castle. Instead of finding her lover waiting to whisk her away outside, she was a wee bit disappointed to find the monk just there on his own. This was not what she was expecting. But the monk reassured her that, you know, your lover, he's waiting on a horse down by the river. Your new life is going to begin soon. Get excited. As he reached the riverbank, a barge appeared and a guide revealed his true plan. Bonnie Jean's lover, when the monk had told him that she'd abandoned him. The monk, he was going to take her for himself. The girl, she was bundled into the vessel. The kidnapper shouted at the boatman, "Take me across the river to the priory." The weather had been calm all day. Suddenly, the heavens opened. The Clyde, it churned in a rage. Rain was lashing down, and the water was getting choppier by the second. The boatman shouted, "They're too heavy for the storm. If you don't lighten the load now, it's too late. We'll all be going down." The monk might have wanted Jean badly, but he cared for himself more than anything. He shoved her over the side without a second thought, to drown in the river. As soon as the man of God had condemned the girl to her watery grave, the boatman pulled back his hood. It was none other than the devil. He grabbed the startled monk. The devil dragged him over the side to join his victim down there, deep in the Clyde. As soon as that happened, immediately the storm eased. The river, flowing past Bothwell Castle, was calm once again. But Bonnie Jean, she's not entirely gone. She returns to the high towers of Bothwell Castle on the anniversary of her death, which just happens to be the last day in October. So every Halloween, she appears at the top of the ruins, gazing out across the Clyde, where a mysterious light can be seen shining in the dark. So on that cheery note, that's the end of my Lanarkshire stories, and I hope you enjoyed them. And if you want to find me after this at all, you can get me on basically any of your social media type things there, or have a look on the website, sign up to my newsletter because it's looking pitifully thin on subscribers. And if you've got any questions or anything, you can email me or, you know, message me on Instagram. Is probably the easiest way because it's where I am most of the time, and I will always reply. But I'll always try and reply. So anyway, thanks a lot, everybody, for listening to me drone on.
That was fabulous. Thank you.
That was great.
And I just have to say, every morning I get up and I have my coffee and I go to Instagram and read your story.
I appreciate it.
Part of my morning routine.
She's always talking about it. You know, everybody else gets up and it's like Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. No, Christine will say no. I was reading Graeme's the latest post.
And to be fair, that is one of the reasons that I do it. is that, you know, it's become this thing for people, I guess. You know, a way of sort of virtually traveling to Scotland, your wee daily slice for people, and it's it's great. And people always thank me for doing it, but really I should be thanking everybody for reading it, because it's, you know, it's much more interesting. Oh, thanks very much, Kim.
Kim's just said Graeme and Molly are awesome. That's so nice. That's so nice. I don't know if anyone has any questions for Graeme. Pop them into the chat. There's still a bit of time to ask some questions.
When you're talking about the story with the blue flame, where was that village? Was that at Auchendrain by chance?
No, so the village is Strathaven. But it's where I've never actually been to get a picture of Strathaven. I was looking thinking I'll try and get a nice online one, and I couldn't find anything. So I thought I'll just use that because it's just reminds me of an old timey village. You know, it's sort of and really the kind of place that, you know, you imagine a lot of these stories being passed down and told. So
I'm just amazed that you were able to get, you know, pull so many stories relating from to Lanarkshire. Yeah,
I know.
That was honestly the amount that I had to cut out, and I was thinking, what am I going to do? I don't want too many about people and too many about folklore and too many, you know. Honestly, there is so many. I mean, it is a huge area, and it's that area because it sort of straddles like the, you know, the central belt, and I think everybody thinks that, well, I don't know everybody, people who don't know any better think of Lanarkshire as this heavily industrial area, and it's not at all. You know, it's beautiful. The Falls of Clyde are generally one of the nicest walks I've ever been on around there, and you know, I don't even talk about New Lanark or anything like that. There's so many things to talk about there. It's just it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously was a big hub for industry, but there's certainly a lot of outlying parishes that were, you know, farming, farming kind of areas rather than industrial.
What's your favorite folklore story?
It's hard. I get asked this all the time, and I never have it. It changes like weekly, I think.
The most recent one I told.
Just about. That's it. I think I've got my favourite one, and I'll sit down and tell them about it. I know that was great. I do love. There's a story from Skye, the Dream Makers, which I like because it's a happy story and it's got a happy ending. And there's so few happy endings in these stories that I think that's probably up there. The Dream Makers of Skye.
What about you, Christine? What's your favourite?
My favorite story? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that I know enough of them to be able to do that. I'm always fascinated. Like, it doesn't seem to matter where you go, there's a story, right? And so that's, I mean, just the fact that, you know, that Visit Scotland is embracing the stories. I mean, they're absolutely everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. And and I really come to understand that since starting to follow your stories on Instagram.
So when I started it, I was, you know, I never really imagined I would still be doing it, this thing down. You know, I'm on, I don't know, 450, 500 odd stories or something on Instagram. And, you know, I've not even talked about some of the most famous ones yet. You know, I thought I'd ran out by now, but you would be surprised that literally every nook and cranny, everything has something to tell about it. And I remember I went to one castle in, I can't remember, in Clackmannanshire. And it was, you know, it's a sort of run-down old ruined tower, and there's not really any signs or anything. If somebody put on TripAdvisor like 1 star, it's just a ruin. There's not, you know, it's just a nothing.
If that's
building.
my clan castle, you can keep it.
It's just, you know, it's like, it's just a ruin. There's nothing there. There's nothing important ever happened there. And I was like, went on and found this fascinating thing about the guy who lived in a kind of Socky tower, and the guy, you know, it was the Shaws, and the Shaws were the what's it, the bearers of the master of the wine cellar at Stirling Castle, and they tied up the royal family, and one of them, you know, they kidnapped King James IV as a child and all this stuff. And I was like, everywhere has a story. Sometimes it takes a wee bit more digging to find it, but there's one there.
So where do you find your stories?
Literally everywhere. It's read everything, watch everything, listen to everything I say, and then the hardest part isn't so much finding the stories, it's finding out what the real story is, because you'll either find the same story in half a dozen different places, and you've got to try and figure out which ones it really, you know, is supposed to pertain to, or you just find this story and it's all different. It's a different time and a different person. You know, it's grown arms and legs, and you've got to try and get back to the root. Because especially in the age of, you know, people putting things up on Instagram and Facebook and stuff, is that folk can just run with stuff. They hear the wrong story and then they pass it on, but well, a wee bit added on for themselves, and it just changes and thingies. So the hard part I think is trying to find not the original. You're never going to get the truth, because a lot of them, you know, it's folklore things. It's deliberately not, you know, accurate.
Factual.
Yeah.
It's just trying to find the most accurate non-factual story.
Right.
I mean, one of the interesting ones that we've got is, I stay in Airdrie, and in the parish of New Monkland there's this stone called Wallace's Stone, which apparently, you know, William Wallace came and this, but I mean, you see all these conversations happening on Hidden Glasgow about, you know, trying to get confirmation that there was a story related to this stone.
Oh, I've got it. No, there's a Wallace's Stone or a Wallace's Cave, or Wallace's Tree. There's everything, and that's the thing, is that, like, that book Blind Harry that I've got was written about, I don't know, 150 years or so after Wallace died, and it's one of the closest things we've got to the story, and it is just an absolute nonsense. But it's brilliant. The stories are brilliant, even though you can read them and you'd be like, there's so much of that we know is not even possible. But, you know, we don't have anything better to go off. So that's where a lot of the sort of legends sort of came from.
Yeah.
You know, it's listening to you talk about having to find the nugget of truth. Claire and I can attest that that's with family history as well, right? We get stories passed down, and then our job as family historians becomes what is the truth? There's always a nugget, but it's not always accurate, right?
That's it. And sometimes, you know, the story that you get, it might be a different generation from the story that's passed down. You know, they might have got mixed up with what generation or what, because everyone had the same names. You know, everybody was
John MacDonald.
It was called after someone, so it gets kind of twisted as it goes down the generations. I noticed that Laurie's actually said, has anyone heard of Shepherds of the Lambs? I think she'd mentioned further up that it was, I think it was people who looked after widows in World War II. I'm sure I've heard of that. I don't know whether
I've not heard of that, but that does sound interesting.
Posted it before. So Shepherds of the Lamb, supposedly men who helped widows and orphans of World War II. I've heard of that, and I don't know whether it's from where I've heard it from.
No. I'm looking forward to that. There are so many stories, and it's kind of an era, I think, that I haven't really explored that much, is the sort of World War I, World War II, you know, the last sort of 120 years odd. I haven't really explored it too much. I'm looking forward to it, though, doing more about that. There's one like Haddo House. There was the Haddo babies, because this big mansion house became a maternity unit for like all of Aberdeenshire as a safe place for mothers to have their babies. So there's, I think, 300 or 400, maybe 500 Haddo babies that all got together and formed a wee club. And I'm going up to Shetland, and there's the story of the Shetland bus, which was the sort of local
and the
Shetland...
cake fridge.
The cake fridge? Oh yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah. I was like, that's a weird story. Oh no, that's just a fridge. That's just a fridge full of cake.
Shetland, the Shetland bus and the cake fridge.
But no, the Shetland bus was the local Shetland fishermen that would smuggle people out in Nazi occupied Norway.
Oh
Because
wow!
it was so close, and that was the code name. Was the Shetland bus.
Did you share that story?
No.
I wonder why that sounds familiar. I've heard it just recently.
I will be. Once I've been up to Shetland and come back, I'll definitely be sharing it.
Spooky. Laurie's saying as well about Shepherds of the Lamb. She said her grandfather was said to be one. In World War II, he worked on the St Mary ship as an engineer and brass fitter, so he never saw any action. It's interesting. I've definitely heard something about this, and I don't know where I've heard it from, but it was a while ago. I tried actually Googling it when I saw it coming up the first time, and nothing came up.
I will be looking into that.
Interesting, yeah. So there's still a bit of time to post any questions for Graeme into the chat box. Just a quick announcement is the next month's webinar is on Thursday the 10th of February. The speaker will be Dr. Irene O'Brien of Glasgow City Archives, and she will be talking on merchants and craftsmen. Quite a good resource if you're struggling pre-1855 research. I will put some details into the chat so that you can register for that now. The other thing, obviously, I'm kind of off my stride because you lost me at the beginning.
So you were going to talk about, we initially started, you were going to give the announcements about kilted culture and kilted ancestors. Yeah. And then your face froze in a really interesting pattern.
I'll look forward to
She wasn't as bad as some of them have been, but
I'll look forward to getting back and viewing the recording for that one. Right, let's look. So kilted ancestors, I know that some of the people on this webinar are already members because I do see some names. Kilted Ancestors is embracing Year of Stories in 2022. We have different topics every month. We're going to have speakers coming in and doing some talks. Graeme, I believe you're going to tell us some stories during that time as well.
Sorry, I put myself on mute. Yep, definitely.
So I think we were talking about crime and skeletons and scandals, possibly.
Plenty of scandals.
Yeah, so lots going on in the group.
Actual skeletons, he said.
Oh no, that's just an idea.
Well, this is the thing, you know, we have the topics for this group and it is open to your own interpretation, because if someone gives you, here's the topic, one person can get a different story from someone else. It's, you know, it's your story, it's how you tell it. So yeah, we're looking for people to come in, share their stories, and as it's a Year of Stories, why not document it? So take the stories that you're posting in the group and put them into a journal or a notebook, or as Christine's doing, you're doing something online, Christine, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm doing a digital journal.
Yeah. Christine's doing a digital one and I'm doing a handmade one. So it's going to be a bit of variation on that. And then the other thing that we've got going on is the Kilted Culture Conference. This takes place quarterly. We have different topics in each quarter and we have 4 speakers during each event. We've got some amazing speakers. And if you go to the YouTube channel that's in the chat box, you will find the launch video for this. It's bookable on Christine's genealogyvic.com website. You can book 1, you can book 2, you can book all 4, and if you book all 4, you get a free webinar in October which shows you how to pull your own family story together. It costs 17 Canadian dollars, which works out about £10 per event. So we're really excited about it.
Oh, £40 for 5, because if you sign up for 4, you get the extra one. Are you presenting at one of those as well, Graeme?
I think so.
No.
No?
I don't think so.
Oh, we should have done that differently.
We could do another one. We get so excited about this one. So yeah, we could do something else. So the other thing that's worth mentioning is, well, what I'll do first of all is I'll put some details into the chat for Kilted Ancestors and Kilted Culture.
I know what it is. You're presenting for me in Canada, the Scottish SIG.
Oh, I'm doing that.
I knew there was another one. Yeah.
Watch this space, so you never know.
You never know.
The other thing as well is, what else have we got? If you're not a member of Lanarkshire Family History Society and you're interested in joining, annual membership ranges between £10 and £16. You receive 3 journals per year, a monthly e-news and use of the Society's Research Centre in Motherwell. And I'll put the link.
And monthly webinars with us.
Yeah.
That's worth the price of admission alone.
I know. I mean, who actually thought when we started out doing this that it would,
I
we would
know.
still be doing it
I know.
now? I mean, really, it's just,
Yeah.
I think it's becoming the new way to go.
It is, and I like it because it allows, as a remote member, as I've said before, you know, I've been a member off and on for 15 or 16 years, and it's really just this last year that I've been able to take part in any of the meetings.
Yeah.
Right. So it's
I
been
think
fabulous.
that's it. And I mean, even some courses or, you know, free webinars and different things that you can sign up for, you can go, you know, ones worldwide.
Yeah.
Where previously you would never have got to attend them. So yeah, it's opened everything up for everybody, I think. So,
it's opened up the world, but it's only because we're all closed in.
I know. And then I don't know if
yes, I do.
yeah, I mean, Kim's saying it keeps some of us busy.
I keep her busy. She's the webinar person for the Scottish SIG.
Ah,
poor thing.
I think it keeps us all busy. I think we all go to more webinars probably than we did pre-pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I just can't help myself. And you have more Zoom chats with people as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd never used Zoom before this.
Look at you now.
I know. So I don't see any other questions for Graeme. As I say, get over to, I've put some details in the chat. I'll put some more in again with his website, etc. So yeah, go along and subscribe to his newsletter. Give him a follow on Facebook or Instagram. And he's actually just joined Kilted Ancestors, so we'll look forward to seeing him in there and posting some details and getting involved in the chat. We're looking for some stories from you, Graeme, with the monthly topics.
So safe travels up to Shetland.
Thanks very much.
Make sure you take your seasickness pills for the journey.
Yeah, I know, that's going to be fun.
Especially this time of year.
I know, it's so funny because when you look at Shetland, you don't realise how far away it actually is, because they always bring it closer to the north of Scotland.
It's always in a wee box. So yeah, but it's I guess it's anywhere from 12 to 14 hours depending on what the water's like, eh?
Yeah, but about 12.
Yeah.
So that's fun.
Good. Right. Well, that's us, folks. Again, we have a fabulous picture of Claire.
Wait, it ends as we started, yeah.
Thanks so much, Graeme, for taking the time and for joining us today. We look forward to hearing from you again.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Cheers. Bye.
Don't